So we sing of your courage and your memory, and we cry, we cry, we cry. We cry, we cry, we cry.
At 8 a.m. on the 26th of August 1987, my sister Vicki Cleary drove down Cameron Street, Coburg, and parked in this very place, 15 metres from the entrance to the Shirley Robertson Kindergarten, where she was a much loved child care worker. Moments later, she was set upon by her armed ex-boyfriend, Peter Raymond Keogh. The facts are that he terrorised our sister in this very place with his knife. He was seen by witnesses trying to drag Vicki into the front seat of the car, which he did. He was seen dragging her out and was seen to stab her multiple times in the stomach, piercing her liver. That done, he ambled across the street, wiping the blade of his knife with a tissue or handkerchief. It was a brutal attack on our sister, who died in the Royal Melbourne Hospital that morning.
The undisputed facts of the attack are that Keogh had waited for an hour for Vicki to arrive at her place of work, was armed with a knife, and had confronted her as she was attempting to park her car. Despite all this,
he was granted a provocation defence at trial in 1989 by Justice George Hampel. He was found guilty of manslaughter, not murder, and sentenced to 3 years and 11 months in jail. The reason Keogh was granted a provocation defence was that it was alleged he was an alcoholic depressive who was more likely to lose control in the context of a separation, especially at a moment here when our sister allegedly told him to piss off or fuck off.
It was argued that those words, alleged and uncorroborated, might be enough to cause a man with Keogh's alleged alcoholic depression to lose control and do what he did to Vicki.
I condemned that verdict. I said it reduced our sister and all women to chattels.
In 2021, I wrote to Premier Daniel Andrews asking him to create a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that would acknowledge the historical failings of institutional responses to violence against women. In my letter, I asked the Premier for an apology for what had happened to Vicki
in this street, in this place, and in a courtroom. The Andrews government rejected my request, but I'll continue to push for an apology.
I said then, and I still say today, that granting Peter Raymond Keogh a provocation defence in circumstances where he invaded Vicki Cleary's private space and was armed with a knife came at the expense of Vicki's human rights. George Hampel had every legal right to reject Keogh's pursuit of a provocation defence. That is my considered opinion. That too was the position of prosecutor Bruce Walmsley, who totally rejected the judge's ruling in R v Keogh.
Vicki's murder in 1987,
and then 18 months later, seeing the murderous Keogh sigh with poisonous satisfaction, as if justice had been done, when the foreman of the jury uttered the words "not guilty of murder," before watching in shock and despair as his secret history of violence against women was tabled
in a courtroom in 1989, had a profound impact on
Vicki's family.
My sister Lizzie was only 14 years of age when she lost her big sister Vicki, her second mother. Lizzie thinks about Vicki every single day. Lizzie, where were you when you got the shocking news that Vicki had been attacked and was dead?
I was at school that day. I remember it was at lunchtime. My best friend and I were sitting out on the school oval having lunch, enjoying the sunshine. The next thing I remember is one of my classmates coming over to me and saying, "Lizzie, you're wanted at the principal's office." So I get up and I head to the principal's office. In the hallway, I see Perry and I see my teachers all gathered together. My teachers were looking down. I remember one of my teachers coming up to me and saying, "Lizzie, you need to go and you need to collect your bag and collect the stuff from your locker." So I did that. I started walking out the building with Perry, and I remember as we got out the glass doors, Perry said to me, "Vicki's died." And I said to him, "What did he do to her?" I was crying uncontrollably. I laid down in the back seat. Dad was in the front. Dad couldn't drive that day. So then I remember that we headed to get petrol, and I remember the petrol attendant who knew us as well, Dad saying to the petrol attendant, "He's killed my daughter."
And of course, that was our dad, Ronald Cleary, who had married our mum, Lorna, the rocks in our lives, at St Ambrose's in 1951. They had 4 boys, one of them died in infancy, and Vicki was the firstborn girl. So we gathered that horrific day in my house in West Brunswick, and you've talked to me a lot about it over the years. Tell me what you remember about that day.
So what I remember is when Perry had driven us down to your place, I remember grabbing my school bag from the car and just running through your front doors. I remember running through your hallway. I dropped my bag and I said, "Where's Mum?" Now I found that she was in the backyard. She was in between your 2 sheds. And I ran up to her and Mum was crying uncontrollably, and I was as well. And she grabbed my face just like a loving mother, and we embraced. We were both crying. I can't remember what she was saying, but I just remember her grabbing my face like she's lost a daughter. But I was her daughter as well. I remember we stayed a few nights at your house. I remember sleeping in the big bed with Mum, and I remember one night I woke up and Mum was not beside me. I can't remember where Dad was, but I know Mum was not there, but I could hear her crying in the distance. So I got up and I walked to your back doors, your back glass doors, and there was Mum crying uncontrollably on her knees, bent over. And I think I remember you getting up as well and coming and hugging her. So that was one thing. I also remember there was another night where we had to go back to Broadford to pick up a few things, and I remember Vicki had some of her clothing still in Mum's one of our wardrobes, and I remember we opened up the wardrobe and there were her beautiful dresses that she used to wear, beautiful flowery dresses, and yeah, it was just horrible. We were just crying. Very hard to deal with. And I was 14 at that age, at that time.
And of course, Lizzie, it didn't end there, did it? We went to trial 18 months later. You were 15 years of age. What do you remember about that trial? Well,
look, to be in that courtroom was absolutely terrifying. To see my family going through devastation, and I was young, so I really wasn't understanding the full concept of it all. But to also hear the way that they were talking about our sister, like they knew her and they didn't know her at all. And then also seeing him have the opportunity to get up into the witness box and say what he did, which was lies.
And of course, that was unsworn evidence. In the day, a defendant, an accused murderer, could give unsworn evidence and not be cross-examined. And the last thing he said in unsworn evidence was that he loved Vicki. Didn't that hurt? Then we got the verdict, not guilty to murder, and you followed Mum out into the foyer.
I remember being in the foyer with Mum, and that happened that the jurors were also leaving the building as well. So, and they were heading straight for the exit. Like they wanted to get out of there. So I remember Mum saying to them, "She was only a girl. Do you know what you've done? You've let a murderer go free."
And because of Mum's words of anguish and me calling him a murderer as I passed him in the dock, we were banned from the body of the court.
We had to sit in the balcony while Keogh was sentenced to 3 years and 11 months.
The day after Valentine's Day, Justice George Hampel delivered a sentencing judgment that ran to 640 words and was over in about 5 minutes. Whilst Justice Hampel offered the opinion that what Keogh did, to quote the judge, had a profound effect on him, he said nothing about how Keogh's killing of Vicki had impacted on her family. In 2001, the woman-hating Peter Keogh committed suicide, not because of what he'd done to Vicki, but because he was under police investigation and I believe was close to being arrested for the arson attack that burnt his ex-girlfriend's house to the ground. He was the only suspect. I detailed the circumstances of Keogh's suicide in my 2002 book, Just Another Little Murder. It's accepted by anyone who understands the history of the provocation law that the granting of a provocation defence to Vicki's killer in 1989 and the manslaughter verdict he received spelt the end of the misogynistic provocation law in Victoria. Its abolition in 2005 was one of Vicki Cleary's major legacies.
I'll add in as well that I remember sitting there and once again being a young girl in a horrifying place, that I remember photos being presented to the jury members. And I didn't see the photos, but I understood that they were of Vicki's torso. For those who knew Vicki, she was a very private person, and I understood that they had to do that. But to see our sister's body being portrayed in that manner, it wasn't very nice either.
So we never got to talk about Vicki or about the circumstances preceding her murder in the courtroom. No one asked any of us to speak about what we knew. But you knew Vicki. Tell us, what kind of girl was she?
She was something else. She was like a second mum to me. She was 11 years older than me, but I remember always being by her side. I remember even being told stories about when I was a little girl in a pram, that her and her best friend would fight over me as they were used to walk me. I remember during that period of time that I spent nearly every single weekend with her. We'd go for drives. She'd take me to the movies. We would just hang out. She also loved her gardening, so her and Mum would be often going to nurseries, pottering around in the garden, planting numerous plants. Vicki loved her music, absolutely loved her music. She had so many albums, which my sister Donna still has. I remember we used to dance and sing, and one day I remember listening to a particular artist and I said to her, "Oh, I really like this person," and she said to me, "Well, when he comes out, when he tours, I'll take you to that concert." Well, Vicki never got a chance to do that. So now in her honour, I make sure that I go and see all her artists whenever they come out. It is a generation of music that was a little bit older than me, but she told me. She taught me about all that genre. She loved the Eagles, she loved Carly Simon, she loved Carole King. We have a beautiful memory of, we all had the Blues Brothers albums back in the day, and I remember her and my niece Catherine singing and dancing in the lounge room to Aretha Franklin. So there you go, strong African American singer. Also, Vicki loved children. She loved animals as well. So she had quite a number of dogs, and we ended up with quite a number of cats as well. And I remember the three sisters, myself, Vicki and Donna, went off to a pet store one day and we ended up with 3 kittens, didn't we? So much to Dad's delight, not really. So we had that's just the person she was. She used to come up and she'd play backyard cricket with the kids.
Great
read.
runner, great
Great
athlete.
runner, absolutely. She'd be running around the property, and she read to us. She was very artistic as well. She just loved to sit there and draw. Loved children.
She loved children, but she loved people too, didn't she?
She did.
There she was at my 200th game in June 1987 at Coburg, blowing the candles out on the cake before I even got to the cake. It was so funny. And then 11 weeks later, we lose her. You know, we're pretty clear about this, Lizzie. Vicky's murder and the trial that followed impacted on the family. It was traumatic. But you've been talking about the health issues that arose after Vicky's murder for you. Tell us about that.
Look, absolutely. Without a doubt, I do believe that had something to do with it. I ended up having thyroid issues, which then, of course, led to weight issues, then, of course, led to confidence issues, anxiety, mental health, you name it. I remember seeing a specialist one day, and he said to me, "Do you know, when you were younger, was there an event or something that happened in your life?" And I said to him, "Well, yes, there was. My sister was murdered." And look, we can't 100% say that was the cause, but I believe that it had a big issue on it. Then, of course, there was my confidence going through life, being overweight, having to still manage that sort of side of things, which caused my life to go one way when I believe it should have been going another way. I've had to battle that, and I do put it down to that. Absolutely.
You're part of the campaign, the anti-violence campaign. You're passionate about it. We have Vicki Cleary Day. You help organise that with me. What do you want to see happen in Australia and the world around this question of men's violence against women?
Well, I want to make a better life out there for women and children as well. So, but for women, we've improved a lot, but we've still got a lot of improving to go. I also want to put my story out there as well, coming from a 14-year-old child dealing with a murdered sister. So I've got all the perspectives. But I want to be part of this campaign that says, hey, it's not good enough and it needs to change, and we need a change. And how about an apology as well, for our mother especially, and for all the mothers that have lost their daughters.
And I suppose what we do have is the story of Vicki Cleary as an inspiration, really, don't we?
Absolutely we do, and she was an inspiration. She was an inspiration to me, definitely.
Great work, Lizzie.
Thank you. Great work to you too.
In memory of the one and only Vicki Cleary.
Yeah, our beautiful sister.
Open up your frozen eyes and let them finally see that stripped of her blindfold, Justicia will be free. She will be free.